Okay, so thank you all for coming today. Really appreciate seeing everybody. I will warn you that yesterday I decided to go to an Irish pub, and with the St. Patrick's Day parade, it was quite crowded. So if my voice gives out, I apologize in advance. I make the best decisions sometimes. Okay, so I want to give a little bit of background on this presentation. I lead education for ministry, and one of the things that comes up a lot is the idea of questioning, and the idea of how much people like to question things. It's one of the things that they fall in love with the Episcopal Church. Now, many times, I'm guilty of it too, we think of questioning things, we think of other people's beliefs. We're very willing to question other people's beliefs. I want to take something different. I want to question one of our own beliefs. Namely, the idea that all are welcome at the Eucharistic table. Are all truly welcome here? Now, I'm a philosopher, as pointed out, and in philosophy, in logic, if you make an all statement, if you can find one exception, that statement is no longer true. So all I need is one exception of somebody who's not welcome at the table. Well, what do you know? I got Judas Iscariot. So we are going to look him over and see, was he welcome and what is the ramifications? So Judas Iscariot is probably best known for betraying Jesus. Do you pray the Son of Man with a kiss? Certainly that. His portrayals in pop culture have been fairly interesting. So if you look at Jesus Christ Superstar, he's a misunderstood person who's trying to protect the Jews from the Romans. If you look at Godspell, he's a good friend who has a tragic lapse in judgment. And if you read Dante's Inferno, he's being eaten alive by the devil. So, as Dante says, because this is just really cool, the soul up there, which has the greatest pain, the master said, is Judas Iscariot. With head inside, he plies his legs without. So, yeah, the devil is literally chewing on him. So, also the circle of hell where Satan is, it's where the worst of traitors are. It is called Judecca, named after him. For the record, Satan has 3 heads. The other 2 in there are Cassius and Brutus, who betrayed Julius Caesar. Okay. So is this the full story? Is this all there is about Judas? Well, in order to do that, we need to kind of look him over. So I'm going to do some preparatory work before I go into the questioning. So who was Judas? Well, he's one of the 12 apostles, obviously. He's also Iscariot to separate him from other Judases. He shares a name with Judas Maccabee. If you know the story of Hanukkah, the Judas Maccabee led a revolt against the Seleucid Empire and was a very popular name. Susan Goober argues Judas was a very common Jewish name. Think of the heroic Judas Maccabee of Hanukkah fame, as well as several minor Judah and Judas characters in the Hebrew and Christian Bibles. Okay, how many of you heard of St. Jude? That was named after the 11th apostle, St. Judas. There were 2 Judases. It's just Jude went by a nickname in part to separate him from Judas Iscariot. And because apparently that was a fairly popular nickname, think the Book of Jude. Okay, so again, there's that idea. So what does this name mean exactly? Can I give us any clues on Judas? Well, according to Gugar, ironically, in light of widespread assumptions about the name Judah in Hebrew means he who is praised. Precisely because of his role, Judas has to be praised as an indispensable creature. So, kind of an irony of God is to be praised.
I didn't understand. Judas is what?
Judas,
did you say depraved?
Indispensable.
The other word.
Is to be praised.
To be praised.
Praised.
Word,
Praised.
yes.
Oh, big difference.
Sorry. No. No, I'm sorry about that. He who is praised. He who is praised. Yeah. Think about, again, the tribe of Judah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, again, does the name Judas mean anything? Give us any insight? Not really. It was a common name. Not shocking that you'd have a few people named that. Even Jesus' brother had the name Judas. So, nobody really knows. What about Iscariot? What does that mean? Well, once again, this is not going to offer us much help. Biblical scholar Bart Ehrman argues, some of the best scholars have concluded that we simply don't know what Iscariot means. Indeed, some have argued, even the gospel writers, some 35 to 65 years after Jesus' death, no longer knew what it meant. So the most common one I've heard is from Kerioth. Kerioth was a place during Joshua's time, but we don't even know if it was there in Jesus' time. We don't even know if that town still existed. I've heard references to the Sicarii. The Sicarii were a group with daggers who would go up against Romans. They were called that because the daggers were the Sicarii. We don't know if he was one of them. We can't quite find proof of it. So, regardless, Iscariot tells us nothing. What is important is one of the 12, and he was treated as such. So, Ehrman argues there's nothing in this first reference to suggest that Jesus put Judas in a different camp or that he recognized Judas would have a role different from the others. Judas has the same calling, the same responsibilities, the same authority, the same mission as everyone else. So again, we kind of get into this habit of thinking that Judas just materialized somehow right before the Passion. Like he's just some guy who wandered in. But if you look at Jesus sending out the 12, sending out the 72, he was there. He did everything with the other disciples. So again, there's no proof that he was different. He was trusted. That's what we miss about the betrayal. He was very trusted. So, was he worthy of this trust though? So according to John chapter 6, 70 through 71, Jesus answered them, "Did I not choose you, the 12, and yet one of you is a devil?" He spoke of Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, for he, one of the 12, was going to betray him. So in John, we have an allusion to this betrayal very early on, called the devil. I'm just going to say something personal experience. If you don't want someone to turn on you, don't call them the devil. I'm going to point that out.
Or invite them to dinner.
Exactly.
Hey, come on in, have a seat.
Yeah, probably not helping the cause. But did Jesus really call Judas the devil? Or was that another disciple he called the devil? So this actually may be a fusion of a couple stories, what John's doing. So John likes to remix stories. We'll actually see it in full force next Sunday, I believe, with unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground. But according to the Milwaukee Atheists, it is believed that John was an independent writer. That's probably not true. Evidence suggests that John was fully aware of the other Gospels and rewrote them in his own words. So, again, he likes to take stories, rewrite them, put them in a different context, do things like that. So what's the original story that John may have been remixing? Well, remember, I got to back up a little bit with this devil story. This is right after Jesus asked, "Will you lead me too?" Peter says, "No, you have the words of everlasting life." It's Peter's confession of faith. Okay, this is John's version of Peter's confession of faith. Now let's see what Matthew chapter 16, verses 16 through 17 state. Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." Okay, I'm going to skip ahead. He gives kind of a speech about what that's going to entail. So I'm going to skip ahead to chapter 16, 21 through 23. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said, that shall never happen to you. Jesus turned to Peter and said, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. Okay, so I wanted to point out this parallel, that in both of these stories, Peter has a confession of faith. And in both of these stories, a disciple is called the devil. Only in Matthew and Mark, it's Peter, and in John, it is Judas. So John may not even be telling us anything about Judas's character, aside from the fact that he betrayed Jesus. It's just kind of one of those things I noted as I read the stories, how this got changed around. So, to keep going at my preparatory work, I know I'll get to my question eventually, don't worry. What was his motive? Why does Judas betray Jesus exactly? Well, the Gospels give hints of a reason. I'm going to skip around to prove this. In John, he's just evil. He's satanic. He does it because he's a devil. I mean, that's already been stated. So John 13:2 states, The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Okay, so he's just evil. Nothing more than that. In Matthew, he wants money. Matthew chapter 26:14 through 16. Then one of the 12, the man called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priest and asked, What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you? So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. So this is where we get the 30 pieces of silver from Matthew. Matthew often kind of has financial things in there that others don't. But what was really the breaking point? What was the moment where Judas decided it was time to betray Jesus? Probably the anointing at Bethany. So John 12:3 through 6 states, Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. One of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold, the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As a keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Anybody getting the sense John does not like Judas? Not a lot of positive things in here. So, but let's also look at the story. In John, it is Judas. And remember, John's the last gospel. So I'm really skipping around. John is the last gospel. Matthew is the second one written. Matthew chapter 26:6-9 states, While Jesus was in Bethany, house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste? They asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. So notice that initially there was a group of disciples. It was not just Judas. So that includes Peter, James, John, Andrew, all those guys. And Mark, the first gospel, it's even less clear who's doing it. Mark chapter 14 verses 3-4 states, While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, Why this waste of perfume? Could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. And they rebuked her harshly. So we have people. We don't know who these people are. The disciples have people. So, to kind of give a little timeline, we have gone from general people in Mark to disciples in Matthew and just Judas in John. It's a little like a game of telephone. and how the story changes. So, also, the interesting thing is there is no money in Mark. There is no money as far as motive goes in Mark. Mark chapter 14, 10 through 11 claims, then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted to hear this and promised to give him money. So he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Again, money comes later. That is not Judas's motive in Mark. So the first gospel has nothing to do with money. Matthew is 30 pieces of silver, and John, all he cares about is money and being evil and general awfulness. So, what was his motive then? A few theories have been thrown out, some rather interesting ones. Aramans, I'll kind of get into this. I'm going to skip over a little bit because it's I don't want to quote 10 pages worth of stuff at you. Like I said, I got to go to Vegas. You got to continue your lives at some point. So, he argues Judas may simply wanted Jesus removed from the public view until after the festival had ended and they could return to Galilee to continue their public preaching. So again, he was thinking that Jesus was just attracting too much attention, that he was going to start a riot. So basically it was just, let's just hope the Sanhedrin talks to him, kind of keeps him out of view, we'll go back to Galilee and we'll go back to the love thy neighbor things. So, I've done Mark, I've done Matthew, I've done John. Am I forgetting anybody?
Luke. Yeah, I was gonna ask, where's Luke?
Yep,
Is it even recorded in Luke?
it is.
I can't remember.
Yeah, no, it is. I'll get to him. So in Luke, Judas actually has no known opinion of the anointing. In fact, none of the disciples do. Okay? Remember, in Matthew and Mark, it's a group of people. In Luke, these people don't include the disciples. Rather, it is Simon the Pharisee who objects. So Luke chapter 7, verses 36 through 39 states, when one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in the town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. By the way, this anointing happens, I think the cross has been mentioned a grand total of 1 time. He's not even en route to Jerusalem yet. So this is completely divorced from the crucifixion. Now some people have argued, was this another story? Was this another event? I don't know. I just find it interesting that if it was another event, why doesn't Luke put the Good Friday one in there? So, I don't know. But what is Luke's motive? Well, possession by Satan. Luke 22, 3 through 6 argues, then Satan answered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12. And Judas went to the chief priest, the officers of the temple guard, and discussed with them how he might betray Jesus. They were delighted and agreed to give him money. He consented, watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to them when no crowd was present. So again, we have Satan entering Judas. I want everyone to remember that in Luke, it's satanic. I want everyone to remember this. That's going to be important. That's why I've been going on about this. Okay, so I'm going to pick that up later. So, are we actually going to get to my question whether or not Judas received Eucharist? And the answer is yes, we're finally going to do that. Okay, so let's start with John. You know, if you think about it, I'm going to paint the scene for you. How many people have seen the movie where they're getting ready to eat and then Jesus points out Judas? There's huge shock, the music's swelling, and Judas runs out. And then they have the Last Supper. Has everybody kind of seen that movie? Or portrayals of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's how it is in Jesus of Nazareth. I think there are other couple Bible movies. You know, sometimes the teachers at the Catholic school really just wanted the kids to be quiet for a couple hours. So that's what went on. So Judas leaves early. Actually, it was a big deal in the Catholic Church. Don't leave early, you're like Judas. It was one Maundy Thursday service, they were using just a ton of incense. And I had to poke my head out, and I told my mom I feel like Judas. Gasping for breath. So, but again, does it stand up under scrutiny though? So first we have to acknowledge that Judas was there for the foot washing. Okay, John has a foot washing at the very beginning. That's why we do it at Maundy Thursday. So John chapter 13 verses 10 through 11 states, Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him. And that was why he said not everyone was clean." So, the foot washing, Judas is there. Judas gets his feet cleaned. That's something that gets lost in the story. So, then Jesus does something kind of interesting. And I think it's in Jesus of Nazareth where I vividly remember this. But he hands him a morsel. So, I'm going to use the Catholic Bible, the one, I think it's like the New American Version, the one that the USCCB uses. I'm going to start with that translation. So John chapter 13, 25 through 27 states, "He leaned back against Jesus' chest and said to him, 'Master, who is it?' The he being the disciple who Jesus loved. Jesus answered, 'It is the one whom I hand the morsel after I've dipped it.' So he dipped the morsel and took it and handed it to Judas, son of Simon the Iscariot. After he took the morsel, Satan entered him. So Jesus said to him, 'What you are going to do, do quickly.'" Word morsel is kind of interesting. You know, I imagine when I said it, you probably had some different images in your head. It's not really clear. Now, the Catholic Bible, the New American Bible, I was right, the New American Bible, says that this was a bitter herb. So the translation note states, morsel, probably the bitter herb dipped in salt water. Is it though? Let's go with the New International Version. By the way, when I do these Bible things, I like to compare the New International Version to the New American Version, just because sometimes you get some interesting differences. The New International Version states, Jesus answered, "It is the one to whom I will give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." Then dipping the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. So not bitter herbs, piece of bread. This is backed up by the New English Translation, New Living Translation. I found a lot of other translations. Some I trust more than others. Now, I'm going to say something, just, a little confession. This has been midterm week, and I had to do a bunch of outlines. I was organizing some stuff for Black History Month, and I completely forgot to learn Koine Greek. I also forgot to study up on meal customs. So, unfortunately, I can't mediate this dispute. All I'm going to say is one exists. And I'm not going to poo-poo anybody's translation either, because the bitter herb signalizes the betrayal, which is pretty powerful. Yeah. The piece of bread, though, is that Eucharist. That's interesting to me right now. So again, I don't know the answer. I'm just saying there's a controversy. I'm saying that the theology is very different however you look at it. Okay, so again, I'm not gonna go against anybody's. But we also have to be careful too, because I don't know much about meal customs. As Amy Jill Levine claims, consequently, Passover Seder today is not the same as when Jesus and his followers would have done. So again, Second Temple Seders were very different. Honestly, it's irrelevant in John. It's actually pretty irrelevant. because this is the day before Passover, meaning it's not a Passover Seder. So John 18 through 28, then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, they did not enter the palace, because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. Trust me, I know that line. I was Pontius Pilate. That was a line that you start getting ready to do it. So again, this is the day before Passover. And I'm going to give you a little bit of assignment if you doubt me on this point. I am not going to read the entire book of Glory for you, because like I said, we all have lives. But if you do read the book of Glory, point out to me the part where anybody eats. It's not there. There's not the this is my body, this is my blood. It's not there in John. That's why some say the foot washing took its place. Again, if you're at home watching on the recording, you can pause, come back to the book of Glory, come back to me. And if I'm wrong, seriously, somebody correct me. I'll make a little redaction. And also, Judas gets bread. So maybe that's the people eating, Judas getting bread. But if that's the case, then he did have communion, but we've got this morsel debate going on. So verdict, inconclusive. John was supposed to be the smoking gun. We actually don't know if he received communion. So let's go back to the synoptic gospels. I'm going to do my little order again. We're getting gospels along the way. So I'm going to look at Mark's gospel, Mark's Last Supper. Matthew is going to pretty much be the same, so I'm going to combine them as Mark and Matthew. So Mark chapter 14, verses 17 through 23. When evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. While they were reclining at the table eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, the one who is eating with me." They were saddened. One by one they said to him, "Surely you don't mean me." "It is one of the 12, he replied, "the one who dips bread into the bowl with me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to the man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take it, this is my body." Okay. Now, could anyone point out the verse where Judas left? Doesn't exist. I read the whole thing. I read the whole thing for transparency's sake. Okay, I left out the wine, but again. Now, at this point, we may want to say, well, wait a minute. John gave us the answer. He leaves in the middle of, when the bread's pointed out, right? There are two problems with this. Number one, John was written at least 30 years after Mark, meaning that Matthew and Mark were not getting sources from John. Now, could they have gotten something from the same source? Yes, I'm not discounting that. They may have gotten something from the same source. But to say that Mark copied off of John is impossible. That I can say. Also, we have to let the Gospels be the Gospels. The second chair of my dissertation was a man named Father Jones. He was an Orthodox priest. And one thing he liked saying is, let Plato be Plato. Don't add things to him. Let Mark be Mark. Don't add Judas leaving when he doesn't say that. Matthew be Matthew. If he doesn't leave, then he doesn't leave. Don't insert John. So once again, I've read the verses. Nobody ever said when Judas left. Inconclusive. So you're probably really irritated because I'm still not giving you answers. I keep going inconclusive. I don't know. But did I forget something again? Have I forgotten something again? I remember I've been at an Irish pub. You can go tell me if I've forgotten something. Oh, right. There's another gospel, isn't there? So, we actually have the Gospel of Luke. And Luke is going to give us our answer. So, Luke chapter 22, verses 19 through 22. "And he took the bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body, given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, after the supper, he took the cup, saying, This cup is the new covenant of my blood, which is poured out for you. But the hand of him who is going to betray me is with mine on the table. The Son of Man will go as it has been decreed. But woe to that man who betrays him. They began to question among themselves which of them it might be who would do this. Notice, first the Last Supper, then the betrayers pointed out. Okay, Jesus talks about Judas being there with him. So Judas does have the Last Supper. He does eat it. And this is very interesting, because remember, Satan is enticing Judas. So Judas is like really evil right now, and really terrible. So as far as that goes, Judas is still welcome. Judas, the one who betrays, the one who is better that he not be born, the one who's going to commit a sin that Dante thinks he should be eaten by the devil for all eternity, is welcome. So that may mean that we're all welcome. And as I sat with this, all these conclusions, I kind of wondered if I was ready for them, honestly. Am I really ready to say all are welcome? People we agree with and disagree with are welcome. The homeless and the rich are welcome. The criminal, the law enforcement officer are welcome. Members of the LGBT community, along with those who express homophobic and transphobic views, they are welcome. The disabled, those who express eugenical views, are welcome. Everyone on the political spectrum is welcome. Everyone excluded, included in other places, are welcome. Anyone we think is good, anyone we think is evil, they're all welcome. Again, I had to sit with it for a while to really think about that. It's kind of comforting because I'm welcome, but it's kind of terrifying that I have to make peace with people I don't like because they're welcome. But then again, comforting and terrifying, Deacon Sheila talked about that today. About the cross, about Jesus. That's kind of comforting and terrifying too. So, have a happy Lenten season, everyone. Remember, you are welcome at the table. And as always, live in love. Thank you.
All right, thanks.